On today's show, I am not joined by my co-host Chris Manning, but instead I am joined by the Eurostep Podcast Network's own Numac to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers seeing their winning streak come to the end of his Milwaukee Bucks.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Before we get started, I just want to let you know that this episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Check them out and go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use all lowercase letters Locked On NBA to ensure that you get a first deposit match up to $100. As I said before, I am Evan Dammarell. I'm one of the two voices behind Locked On Cavs, one of the two monotone white nerdy guys behind Locked On Cavs. But as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm not joined by my other nerdy white podcast host, Chris Manning. Instead, I'm joined by GSPN or the Eurostep Podcast Network's Numac. Numac, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good, Evan. Thanks for having me on. A tumultuous week in Bucksland, but having a good Wednesday night for sure.
We'll definitely have to talk about coaching situation later on in this show, just because, as a little bit of a spoiler for Friday's show, I'll be having, I guess, your boss, Ty Windish, on the show to talk about the coaching changes. Yeah, good buddy Ty. To talk about the coaching change as well. I want to get a temperature check from just everyone out in Milwaukee or Bucks fandom in general. But looking at this game, not a bad win for the Bucks, I'd say. But for me, just seeing Cleveland's winning streak come to an end like this, my biggest takeaway really in this game was these two teams played a week ago today, as of when we're recording this. And I can definitely say, without a shred of doubt, that Giannis Antetokounmpo definitely was a difference in this game compared to the last one. He was just sensational in this matchup. And I think not having him in Cleveland after he was ruled out with that shoulder contusion really altered the trajectory of that matchup, because the Cavs could lock in on Damian Lillard versus this time around. Giannis is just he's literally a freak. It's in the nickname. Like, he was unstoppable in this one.
Yeah, Giannis, pretty good at basketball, some might say. 35, 18, and 10 for the triple-double. That last two assists coming on a pair of corner threes from Chris Middleton and Malik Beasley, and I think in the last 2 minutes. But yeah, I think you put it up perfectly. When Giannis is on the floor with Damian Lillard, the two are just pretty close to unstoppable when they're both playing well. And having that option for the Cavs to actually have to guard Giannis rather than just Brook in the pick and roll and just Brook down low adds a whole other wrinkle. Obviously, Giannis being a two-time MVP and NBA champion, he's going to be a big difference maker. And we saw that exactly tonight. And I think it was like just a really efficient night for Giannis. He didn't really have a whole lot of, people in the way, is one way to say it. Like Jared Allen, we can talk about it in a minute, but I love the Jared Allen versus Brook and Giannis matchup. It's always fun. But Giannis had 16 24, only 3 shots at the line tonight. So just a very efficient run and dunk man tonight.
Well, I mean, some would say he may not have a bag. In this scenario, I think, yeah, really efficient is a great way to put it. I think the fact that he more than put the team on his back in this one. Like, he put up video game like numbers, let's be frank. And it's a smart shout, just like the Jared Allen matchup with both Brook and Giannis is a completely different wrinkle compared to, at least in the first matchup between these two a week ago, these two teams. It was Jarrett, having to deal with Brook, of course, and maybe like some of the rim pressure that the Bucks are trying to throw at him. But not to discredit Brook, he is a defensive player of the year, finalist, winner, champion, and also like still, kind of set the template for like what a modern big man should be in terms of 3-point shooting and rim protection, and maybe some just like switchability on defense. But it's just so much harder to have to deal with those two, especially when you don't have Evan Mobley. And I think Cavs fans will be quick to point the finger at that. Like, no Evan Mobley in this matchup certainly changed things, but also when you're dealing with a guy like Giannis, you have to kind of tip your cap at times too, because this is arguably, depending on how you feel about Nikola Jokic or Kevin Durant, LeBron James, etc. But like Giannis or Luka as well. But like Giannis is one of the very best players in the world, and there are just some nights where like the best player in the world would do best player in the world things, and you have to kind of plan around that a little bit. And as impossible that is, to kind of maybe mitigate other things for the Bucks, and you just saw a bit of a trickle down effect, like Giannis applying constant pressure, and then for some reason the Cavs just kept fouling Dame instead of him, which is somewhat surprising, but you can definitely see like it's night and day compared to when these two played. These two teams played last time when they played in Cleveland a week ago.
Right, and I think just the addition of Damian Lillard has had a bit of, I don't want to call it a resurgence, to be honest, because he's been good for the last 5+ years and played at that MVP caliber play that entire time. But everything just looks a lot easier for him. Like, he's sometimes not as efficient as you'd like him to be, but looking back at his game log, I think since the calendar turned over, he's only scored under 30 points 3 times in what looks like to be about 12, 13 games. Like, that's just, if you're scoring 30 plus points in 35% of your games, that's pretty darn good, I'd say. And so, but yeah, like Jared Allen, as you had alluded to, had the same number of points tonight as he did last week, same number of rebounds as well, I believe. I think only made one more shot. So he was still just as effective as he was with and without Giannis in those 2 games. I just think like Jared Allen is one of like the matchup problems for Brook specifically. He's a lot more agile than a lot of the centers Brook faces on like I should say daily basis, but from game to game. Jared Allen just has all the tools to make Brook's life hell. He's really good in the pick and roll. He's really good at that mid floater, like hook shot, push shot, whatever you want to call it. He's really efficient in that area and just a really good rebounder. Like, there's a lot of times when Bucks big men like Brook and Giannis particularly tend to go for like tap outs versus actually grabbing the ball. More often than not, when I'm watching Cavs games, Jared Allen's going up and like grabbing the ball pretty forcefully and putting it back up for 2 easy points or getting that defensive rebound. So yeah, it's always fun watching Cavs Bucks games because I think the matchup is so fun to watch, even like if fully healthy, especially between Mobley guarding Giannis and then Jared Allen guarding Brook when their starting lineup is out there. But then watching Okoro guard Dame too, especially compared to last week versus this week. Like, I think Dame might have had something to say about last week's game, and I guess we'll go into that a little bit later about the sort of headspace they were all in. But Dame tonight, a rather inefficient game, but the times when I saw him being guarded by Okoro, he was hitting some tough shots over some long hands.
Like, even if Damian Lillard is efficient, like, he's still gonna the tough shots. Like, he still had 28 points, 4 assists. Like, they didn't need his playmaking this game because Giannis was on another one. But just kind of focus on the focus of just like Giannis being such a key difference maker in this matchup compared to when these two teams last met in Cleveland. Were you at all maybe a little nervous when the game got like within 6 points, about like like 5 minutes left in the fourth, or you're like thinking like, oh no, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo on our side to kind of just widen the gap? And it was still close, maybe till about a minute plus left in the game when Donovan Mitchell hit a layup to cut it to 8. But it just, to me, I'm like, you had said like the last 2 assists he got in his triple double, those were the backbreakers for Cleveland. Like, you just don't know what to do in those situations just because he's just an otherworldly player that can just be in the right spot at the right time and find the teammates, whether it's Chris Middleton, who was also awesome in this game compared to the last time these two teams met. But like, it's just fascinating to me. Just, I don't know, like what your temperature check was, or just like what your overall feeling was when looking at the Cavs got to get close, but like you have the best player in the world in your corner.
So when they cut it close, I think they got, like you had said, they got down pretty close to 6, and I wasn't nervous because they had played well all night. Like, I didn't think they were going to lose because of the way it was trending. Like, I thought they had played well enough to be able to get themselves back on track and finish out the game. But that doesn't mean I wasn't like cautiously optimistic. Like, it definitely has happened before against way worse teams than the Cavs, where they just can't close out 10-point leads with like 6 minutes to go. And that's just something that I think, again, we'll talk about later with the elephant in the room. but that will be fixed going forward. And I'm glad that they like locked in tonight. Everyone talks about like the dead coach like bounce game. I think that is what this like the end of this game definitely was. They called timeout, they locked in, and they started making shots and being a little more efficient than they were early in the fourth quarter, end of the third quarter kind of stuff. Like it was, if it had gone another minute, like when it gets down to like 4 minutes and they're starting to get like within 4, then yeah, I start to get pretty worried that Donovan Mitchell keeps getting hot and he leads them to victory, or is death by 1,000 literal cuts from Max Strus, Isaac Okoro, or even Jared Allen at times. Because while I thought the transition defense was a little better tonight, there were some hiccups where I was like, that was pretty bad. The half court defense obviously is still going to need some work, and I think that's pretty evident. Like they finished, the Cavs obviously score 116, held them under 30 for 3 quarters, but then in the fourth, the Cavs scored 37, so almost 40, which is like, you'd rather have that be the first quarter, right? Like you don't want to let them score almost 40 in the most important quarter. And so I think that is something to be cautious about going into Friday's game, because I don't think you can keep this Cavs team and how well they've played, especially with Donovan Mitchell. And I think he had an okay game. He had 15 points going into the fourth quarter, I believe, and then ended up with 23, 10 for 24, 2 for 11 from 3. Like that's just not going to happen probably again on Friday. Sure, hope not as a Cavs fan, but just making sure that half court defense gets shored up, obviously before the playoffs, and hopefully with the incoming coach. But I guess we'll see from that way.
So
we make a long answer short. I was worried, but not like head in hands kind of worried.
So we'll talk about the trauma Adrian Griffin's coaching that he left with you in the third segment, but I do want to talk more about Donovan Mitchell in the upcoming one. But pause for a quick second and give you a word from some of today's sponsors. Today's episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by Grammarly. When it comes to writing, Grammarly supports you from start to finish. For over 10 years, Grammarly has been powered by AI technology you can trust to help you across all the places where you write the most. And now, Grammarly helps you do even more. With one click, you can easily brainstorm, rewrite, and reply with suggestions based on your context and goals, so you can improve productivity from you and your teams. When you're stuck with writing at work, Grammarly can help you get started with ideas, outlines, and even tips. It can also help you paraphrase and rewrite more concise instantly. But my favorite feature has to be that Grammarly can help you summarize your emails and provide suggestions on how to reply in seconds so that every work email you get actually does find you well. Best of all, Grammarly is free. So start being more productive at work and get Grammarly today. Just go to Grammarly.com/podcast to download it for free today. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Cavs is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is North America's largest daily fantasy sports platform. The easiest and most exciting way to play DFS, so it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you win more than or less than on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and watching the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this basketball season. Select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Testing my skills on PrizePicks this basketball season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and with these skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds, and it also offers quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players, stat types, making them, and PrizePicks, the #1 daily fantasy sports app. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday each Tuesday. PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this season. So, check out PrizePicks today. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, and use the code LockedOnNBA, again, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100 and enjoy daily fantasy sports made easy. And we are back with more Locked On Cavs. But before we head into this segment to talk about our usual awards, as some of our regular listeners may know, I gotta let you guys know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Just go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So, for those who may not know, and this is Numac's first time on the show, usually after we talk about our big takeaways from the game, we hand out MVP, stat of the night, and play of the night. And for me, at least, Numi, my MVP in this one is Donovan Mitchell. You had mentioned he wasn't super efficient in this game, and there's chances he can bounce back. But for me, the fact that he played so aggressively down the stretch, despite being in 5 fouls and really like tiptoeing that line of possibly fouling out and letting this game completely go awry, but he just kept fighting and trying to keep the Cavs in this game, really gave me those MVP vibes for sure. And if it wasn't for him, like overall, it's Giannis in this game just because of how dominant he was. But for me, at least on the Cavs side of things, it was Donovan Mitchell. What about you? Who's your MVP of this game?
I think it has to be Giannis. 16 to 24, the triple double with 18 rebounds is pretty nuts. But yeah, for Donovan Mitchell, like I think him getting to 5 fouls was pretty worrisome for Cavs fans, and I guess the Cavs in general. I think it was 5-6 minutes left in the game, and they kept him in there. He kind of had to at that point, and he played quite well down the stretch, like you had mentioned, being an attacker and trying to lead the team to what would have been a pretty solid victory. But yeah, I guess for me from the Bucks side, it's easily Giannis. Like you could also argue that it could be Chris or Dame. I'd probably give it to Chris over Dame just because he was much more efficient and looked a little more, I guess, active. The breakaway dunk on that steal was pretty awesome. Like, I don't know how often you guys watch Bucks games, but Chris Middleton has not been able to dunk for almost his entire career. Him and Eric Bledsoe, to go back to the doldrums of the Eric Bledsoe days, used to have contests throughout the season of who could have more dunks. And it wasn't a lot. It was like 6 a season because neither one of them have hops. So seeing Chris get that steal and go down for a dunk was a pretty exciting play for me. But yeah, I think without a shadow of a doubt, it has to be Giannis.
Would you say that Chris steal and dunk was your play of the night just because of how rare the Chris Middleton dunks are? Or do you have another one in mind?
It's tough because it wasn't the most exciting play. Seeing Chris be active on defense is one of the more promising things Bucks fans can hope for. He has been somewhat of a turnstile on defense for the past couple of years, especially throughout his injuries and his brief stints in coming back. And so to see him have active hands, navigate a screen, and interrupt a pass was good to see, kind of the old Chris, and then get down the court. But I think the end of the probably 2-3 minutes left in the game, Giannis had a pretty thunderous dunk that was pretty awesome. It's hard to not appreciate every Giannis dunk because you try to appreciate these guys while they're here and just in the moment. And I think every big Giannis dunk like that is just so much fun to watch. I think it was the Malik Beasley up screen with him with Sam Merrill trailing. Sam Merrill goes to the left, Giannis goes to the right and takes off and slams it. I think that's the play of the night for me.
Say that's an old teammate helping out his current teammate have the
that's right.
play of the night for you. But
Sam Merrill, the player that hit the three to break the NBA threes record made in the game, team record back against the Heat, I believe, in the championship season. Yeah, because it was I think it was that first round. Sam Merrill bringing the championship caliber to the Cleveland Cavaliers.
You know, he does like to he downplays when he and Mamadi were with the Charge, and that was the first thing you asked them. They downplayed that championship because we didn't play that much, but that is a cool moment. And for me, my play is actually a Sam Merrill hustle play. It was maybe a minute or so left in the third quarter. Brook Lopez missed a jumper, and then you see there could have been an easy second chance opportunity for the Bucks there just because of the way the ball bounced off the rim and backboard. But then he saw Sam Merrill get floor burns and just dive to the ball, and then he kicked it forward to Donovan Mitchell, who kind of slowly brought the ball up. That's what you tend to do with about less than a minute to go in the quarter. You want to make sure you set up the right play to close things, but you saw him kick the ball to, I believe, Karis LeVert, who then found Sam Merrill at the top of the perimeter, and then Donovan Mitchell made a baseline cut, and you just watched Sam Merrill rifle a pass with two hands right to Mitchell, who got a really clean layup right at the end of the quarter. I'm just like, you know what, Sam Merrill, you keep making these right plays, where I'm like, you're just a fun dude to watch. Like, I think the fact that also like he made the most threes for the Cavs tonight is always still surprising to me. But then also the other night, he almost broke the franchise's record for most 3-pointers made off the bench. So the Sam Merrill experience has been a lot of fun. But yeah, glad he was a feature in both of our play of the nights. But real quick for me, before we head to the elephant in the room, the Adrian Griffin one. My stat of the night is just the fact that despite having to deal with Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo in this matchup, Jarrett Allen finished the night with 0 fouls, which I think is honestly very impressive. Just because when Milwaukee was at Cleveland, I asked Jarrett, like, hey, how hard is it to like defend a team like the Bucks, where you have literally Giannis Antetokounmpo, a force of nature, on one side, and then you have Brook Lopez, who can pull big men out of the paint to make either it harder to defend him or also just make Giannis's life easier at the basket. And Jared's like, it's really hard. He's like, I accept the challenge. He's like, with Giannis, like, you have to defend him, try as hard as you can to defend him without fouling. He's like, but he's just so unrelenting. Like, you sometimes want to like just make the lazy play and just rake your arms down and just foul him while he's attempting the basket, either force 2 free throw attempts or, an and one opportunity, just because like you get fed up trying to deal with him. And I think it's just impressive to me to see like he just stepped up again and defended. I think did his best against Giannis. I think, again, it's hard to defend a force of nature like that. But the fact that he dealt with so much constant rim pressure from a guy who went 15 of 23 close to the basket, like, not bad stuff from Jarrett Allen tonight.
Yeah, like I said earlier, he's very fun to watch against this duo of Giannis and Brook. But I think like the biggest thing is that when you don't have a guy like Evan Mobley out there, it just makes Jarrett Allen's life that much harder. And to do that as the primary big guy out there, like, man, do it without following. Hats off to him, because that's very impressive. Like, Dean Wade's been pretty good this season. He's kind of been good in spots as I've watched some of the Cavs games in filling in for Mobley. But I think you can't undersell how much Jarrett Allen meets this team.
No, absolutely. Do you have any stat that stood out for you before we head to our next break?
I'm going to keep repeating it. 16-24 is stupid. Like, 66% is a pretty solid percent from the field. Like, I know Run and Duckman gets memes on NBA Twitter and people who for some reason don't like Giannis, but I mean, point me to games where you can score 35 on 16-24, and I don't care who you are, you're getting applause from me.
Well, I think a mutual friend of ours would disagree, but let's put a pin in this conversation one more time. We're going to come back, talk about the coaching trifecta of Adrian Griffin, Joe Prunty, and Doc Rivers, and also just any final notes we may have from this game before we look ahead to the end of this episode. So we'll be right back. Today's episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by Hungryroot. Whether braving the cold or dealing with crowds, grocery shopping this time of year is the worst. Why not stay home and let Hungryroot handle it? With Hungryroot, you can kickstart a week of healthy eating and get groceries delivered right to your door. Hungryroot is the easiest way to get a fresh, high-quality food delivered to your door. It offers healthy groceries and simple recipes in one place. Take a fun, short quiz, and Hungryroot will get to know you, your goals, and your eating habits. They'll ask what flavors you like, which kitchen appliances you use, and more. And then they'll keep your needs and preferences in mind and start building your cart with delicious recipes and all your grocery needs for the week. Hungryroot will recommend recipes and groceries based on your tastes. Take their suggestions or choose anything you want. They've got fresh produce, high-quality meat and seafood, pantry staples, healthy snacks, sweets, and so much more. They go beyond your weekly grocery haul with thousands of easy recipes that put your groceries to good use before they get forgotten in the back of your fridge. And the best part is Hungryroot follows a simple standard. It just tastes good, and it's quick to make, and it contains whole, trusted ingredients. Spend less time meal planning, shopping, and cooking, and more time enjoying healthy food that you'll love with Hungryroot. Hungryroot currently offers Locked On Cavs listeners 40% off their first delivery, free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/locked on to get 40% off your first delivery and to get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/locked on. Don't forget to use the link so they know that we at Locked On Cavs sent you. And we are back. All right. We just got to talk about it. So,
yeah.
What was your initial reaction when the news broke that the Milwaukee Bucks were parting ways? The Milwaukee Bucks were 30-13 at the time, second place in the Eastern Conference. We're parting ways with head coach Adrian Griffin.
Well, to give context to the entire conversation, I think you have to understand that this has been a talking point amongst Bucks fans since Game 1. Like there has been people who just been preying on Adrian Griffin's downfall since the beginning for reasons unbeknownst to me, whether it be just didn't like the hire, wanted somebody else, this, that, or the other. And so I was firmly on the side of, yeah, Adrian Griffin has some deficiencies as a head coach, and that this team should be better than it is. But I don't think you make this. You don't fire a coach that's on a team that's doing this well, given that he's only a first-year head coach. And part of that for me stems from the fact that they hired Adrian Griffin for a certain look of this team, and then with the Damian Lillard trade, totally flipped the dynamic of that team on its head. A defensive forward team with Drew, with Brook back, and with hopefully Chris coming back to form throughout the rest of this season, looking back at like this point of view from early July, very defensive team. Got Malik Beasley. He's not the best defensive player. He's been doing okay this year, but it just looked like this was going to be a defensive team, right? Well, then you trade away your point of attack defender, Drew Holiday, for Damian Lillard, one of the best 75 players of all time. Goes from being a very defensive team to now a very offensive team. And I think where the rub was and why this firing happened in part is because, and I think what my biggest concern was with Adrian Griffin this entire season is that, okay, you have this high-powered team of Giannis, Dame, Chris, and Brook as your core four, right? Malik Beasley had an absolute phenomenal beginning to the season. He's a little bit cooled off now, but he's having a great season from three. Why isn't this team blowing out bad teams? Why are they going down to the wire to the Pistons in multiple games? Why are they going down to the wire with the Spurs? Like, there was so many games where Giannis and Dame had to play 35 minutes because otherwise they lose. And that was, I guess, my biggest concern, as well as why I wasn't so much shocked that they lost, right? Or that they lost, that they fired Adrian Griffin. Because if you're going to have the star power and the offensive star power that the Bucks have, you have to be putting away these games in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, so that you can rest your stars for when it matters in April, May, and June. Like, that's what was so nice about the Mike Budenholzer Bucks, is that, yeah, they'd go win 60 games and eventually get bounced in the first round against Miami, but at least for all intents and purposes, they were rested for that matchup, right? They weren't having guys get worn down when it comes to April, and they were tired by the time the playoffs came. Like, they were fresh. You were getting fourth quarters of Thanasis, Sam Merrill at times, Robin Lopez 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and it was bench guys, right? It was just bench lines because they're up by 30. Like, you just keep the scoreboard moving, and that's a good way to win the game when you're up by 30 at the end of the third quarter. But it's been reported all over the place that with Jimmy Haslam in attendance in Cleveland last Wednesday, that was just, I think, it for the ownership. And ultimately, I think it was a mutual decision. This isn't reporting. I'm by no means source, but from what I've been reading, it was kind of a mutual decision from ownership and John Horst to move on from Adrian Griffin, mostly because he had lost the locker room. And I think that was what was evident tonight. The team looked a lot more locked in than they did on, I guess, the last 3 weeks since the in-season tournament, honestly. Like, they just looked a lot better and looked more enthusiastic to play basketball.
So I'm going to ask about Doc Rivers in a second, but you made note of this early into the episode or the show, rather. Speaking of locked in, Damian Lillard seemed to have like a bit of an edge against Isaac Okoro after Isaac Okoro locked in and locked him down when they last played in Cleveland, where I don't know. It was interesting. Ken Carmen from 92.3 The Fan noted like he was at the game and it felt like the Bucks were kind of just quitting on Griffin in that game, just with how
Yeah.
bad it got. But I want to ask you, like, what did you see from Dame that you wanted to that you tipped your cap about
Tonight,
Yeah,
I think he was. It's hard to say because I still think this offense is playing a lot of your turn, my turn basketball. Like between Dame and Giannis, there's not a whole lot of team efficiencies when it comes to them playing on offense. It's Giannis brings the ball up and initiates the offense. Dame stands on the 3-point line and kind of is ready for an outlet pass should it come. Okay, Dame's turn. Dame brings it up, initiates the offense, and Giannis is there for the pick and roll if need be. But it nothing really flows that well. I just think when I watched Dame tonight, he just was better. Like he was hitting tough shots where tough shots weren't falling against the Cavs last week. And like Dame is obviously one of the best shooters in NBA history. He's capable of hitting those tough shots almost always. And for the Bucks to be a championship contender, he needs to hit those tough shots. In a very similar vein to how Chris Middleton has made himself a career. The joke amongst Bucks Twitter is that Chris Middleton is tough shot express, like all aboard. He will do turnaround fadeaway jumpers from the elbow and drain it, and you're like, why are you taking that shot? It goes down. Okay, nice job, Chris. Dame's the same way. Like Dame does a great job of driving the lane and like jump stopping fadeaway from 10 feet and hitting nothing but net. When he's not on, he's not hitting those. And I think he just was hitting those tonight. Like he did chuck a little bit from three. He had 2 of 9, but his other 6 shots, in my opinion, were pretty good shots from the middle of the floor. And that's where I don't want to see him do more of that, but I want to make sure that that's still in his bag as he continues to, as this entire team continues to get better on offense, because I think his dribble penetration, particularly against anybody that isn't this defense, because Jared Allen and Isaac Okoro have done a really good job of making sure that Dame doesn't get easy looks at the basket, where Dame has been really good around the basket for most of the year, it has seemed like. And so if he can recognize that matchup and hit these mid jumpers to death against the Cavs, so be it. I think that's like why I think he looked a little bit better tonight versus last week when he was just abysmal all around.
Okay, one last question for me as I ponder my final thoughts. But looking ahead, like this is I would assume maybe the first or one of 2 or 3 games Joe Prunty coaches this team. But looking ahead with Doc Rivers, do you think you're going to see similar responses from this Bucks team? Just as a guy who watches them all 82 games a year, every single postseason game, you consume all the content. So you obviously have a greater perspective than myself or any of our listeners do. But like looking ahead, like can Doc Rivers right this ship and kind of turn things around for Milwaukee? Because I texted you and to Friday's guest Ty Windish about this, or messaged you guys on Discord, like, are the Bucks normally this bad on defense with Adrian Griffin? Because it was stark. Just because even if Giannis is out, like they were getting shredded at points. And do you think Doc can kind of be the doctor, quote unquote, to fix what's been ailing Milwaukee, or is he gonna kind of have to just lean more into I don't know. I'm interested to see, just because like other friend of the program, Jordan Christmas, is taking victory laps that Doc Rivers got another job. But just more so, I'm curious, like what are your thoughts on the Doc hire, and like will this be the difference maker that the Bucks were hoping they got with Griffin when they first brought him on board?
First and foremost, shout out Jordan, good friend of the pod. Secondly, that's the question, right? Let me ponder my orb and see if Doc Rivers can fix this team. If not, there's a good chance the Bucks are paying 4 coaches at once come next September. If so, they have a good chance to.
That's the perk of a Jimmy Haslam team. You get to experience what Cleveland fans have been experiencing for over a decade now.
Yeah, I'm not really enjoying the experience so far, but I would rather. I'll put it this way: I'll get to the is Doc a good hire in a second. I think firing Adrian Griffin, as much as I wish it would have waited a season, I think it ultimately is a good decision based on how badly he lost that locker room, apparently. Now, where the rub for me comes in is Doc Rivers is a player's coach through and through, right? That's his biggest benefit to a team, is that players respect him, good players respect him, all-star, all-pro, all NBA players respect him. He's a player's coach until he isn't, right? Until he's calling James Harden out in press conferences, until he's saying Joel Embiid needs to be better in press conferences, and sort of airing out dirty laundry after a playoff loss every single year, right? That is the Doc Rivers problem, and I guess for me, that he loves blowing 3-1 leads. So, is Doc Rivers a good hire for the Bucks? Maybe. I am not, frankly, a fan of it. His reputation precedes him as a coach. I think that long term, it's probably not a good idea. But in all reality, this isn't a long term decision. This is I want to win a title in the next 3 years decision, hopefully in the next 6 months decision. And so if he can lock in and give this team an identity and give them something to play for and not be so, I guess, cranky, the team looks just like they were just in a pissy mood for all intents and purposes on the court all the time this season. And so if he can get them to lock in and focus, have them develop an identity and get them to actually function as a moving offense and not so much iso ball as I'd like to, as we've seen, then yeah, I think he'll do just fine. I think success for Doc Rivers and this Bucks team will be measured by the end of June. If that's when we can make the decision, it's a good decision, because that would mean the Bucks probably made the finals. But if we have to litigate, is Doc Rivers a good head coach by the end of April, then it's not. Then I don't think he might keep the job for another year. But a first round exit after hiring him mid-season is not going to be the best look. This team is way more talented than first round exits again. Then as same thing with last year. Again, Giannis didn't play in 2 of the games last year, but they're just way too talented to be losing in the first round this year against, golly, I forget who even is the 8th seed right now. But it just wouldn't be a good look, right? That would be cause for some major concern. And that's where I have a problem, is when does Doc Rivers as a head coach show his ugly side as a head coach? Because it didn't go well in LA. It didn't go well in Philadelphia.
There could be a point he does overstay his welcome in Milwaukee as well. And if that ends up being what pushes Giannis closer to the door, he obviously course correct at that point. And
I will push back on getting closer to the door, because Giannis leaving has been a rumor that has surfaced at every step of Giannis's career since his rise to stardom. Every contract, every summer, will Giannis sign his contract? He does. It quiets for 6 months. They lose a 40-point game in January. Does Giannis want to leave? Murmurs arise. And then he's been here his entire career. So until someone with some weight to throw around says there's murmurs, I think it's more as the wind blows with those rumors. But for all intents and purposes, I don't think Doc will overstay his welcome in the next 6 months with the players in the front office. I worry about the next 18 months. What does the end of next year look like? Because I don't have confidence in Doc Rivers as a playoff head coach. I know Jordan, you had mentioned Jordan Christmas taking victory laps at Doc Rivers' coaching job. He had mentioned to Ty on Twitter that he was good at some points in the playoffs last year. But the last, 2008, Evan? 16 years almost since Doc Rivers won a title. There are Bucks fans that don't know about that title. They didn't watch that title.
There's Bucks fans who are now able to drive a vehicle in the United States that were born the same year
that Doc won a title. Like the NBA is such a different game than the last time he had true success, right? Mm-hmm. I think he only went to one final since then, or that was his one.
No, he coached the Celtics to the finals the year after that, I want to say, and they lost to the Lakers, and that started another mini three-peat for Kobe and Powell. And so they won 2 finals in a row, then they failed to make that. They didn't have a second three-peat. They won 2 in a row because they beat Boston the first year, then they beat Orlando the second year. Because that was the year LeBron.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so Doc Rivers last time went to the finals was when Obama was in office. Early Obama, first term Obama. And so I just think I just have the hardest time having confidence in a coach that hasn't been to the finals since then. And to give a little optimism, I saw a fun little stupid stat that Doc Rivers, when he coaches a green team, has 1 title. When he coaches a blue team, the Magic, the Sixers, and the Clippers, he has 0. So maybe the colorway is the good to go.
Might be it, but hey, if he's a fan of green, he's getting plenty of money from the Sixers.
Reportedly.
And now the Bucks.
Well, yeah, and the Sixers. And I don't know how much he was making with ESPN. I'm sure it was a pretty penny. So he has that check that was going for a couple months, and now a reported quote unquote lucrative deal with Milwaukee. I'm not penny pinching because it's not my money, but giving lucrative money to Doc Rivers is certainly a choice.
Well, for what it's worth, as we head out, he can't air any dirty laundry ever since Giannis held the team basketball operations guy accountable to make sure that the laundry.
The equipment manager.
Equipment manager. There we go.
Yeah, he said my jersey's a little too damp coming to that dryer. Can you please put it back in on tumble dry low, please? I'd appreciate it. No, I think that I'd hope most people understand that was Giannis saying the organization needs to focus.
I know. I was trying to be fun.
I know. No. I've seen weirdly way too many serious people about that. In a very much similar fashion as Laddergate from last year. I could go on forever on this kind of stuff that people get Giannis all hyped up about, but I digress.
Well, if you enjoyed this man's voice, as I posted on X or Twitter, the most Wisconsin-sounding man possible, you can find him on the Talk of the Tundra podcast, where he breaks down everything and anything regarding the Green Bay Packers. They just recently went through a heartbreaking loss to the San Francisco 49ers, but a lot of bright future ahead for the Packers. You can see the logo if you're watching on YouTube right behind him, actually, on a beautiful flag as he ducks to my right, his left. But Numac, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it, buddy. And for everyone listening, on our way out, I just want to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for your 24/7 covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel.